I played Tragic Arrogance in the main deck of green-white tokens last weekend. I really liked it, and I think it's going to pay off for Osyp, particularly in this matchup.
So let's get this match going. Here we are, round one of the StarCityGames.com Standard Open in Baltimore, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. Osyp is going to start off with a tapped Canopy Vista past the turn to David, who's going to deploy a Plains and a Dragon Hunter. So this is the kind of start that he needs. He wants to play, something along the lines of 3 spells by turn 2 to try and stay in it with this tokens list.
Yeah, and it's pretty great that Osyp is able to be on the draw here. David having to burn a removal spell on turn 2 rather than deploy more threats is a pretty big deal. If David had been on the play, we could have seen a similar board shape, except David would have 2 more creatures potentially pushing in for damage.
So Osyp does have a Sylvan Advocate on turn 2 along with a Forest. David is going to use Declaration of Stone to take care of it and knock Osyp down to 18. Osyp will cash in that clue and draw a card. Just has a land and a pass. David's going to get in for 2 more points of damage here on his 3rd turn with that Dragon Hunter. That's going to drop Osyp down to 16. Here we have a Thraben Inspector. It's going to bring along a clue with it and another 1-drop. So here we have that triple 1-drop. Could have potentially been on the battlefield on turn 2. It's very fortunate for Osyp that he was on the play.
Yeah, and David has a decent start. It's not the fastest. Here David would really like some sort of emblem effect or maybe another Declaration of Stone for this token, but all Osyp wants to do is just kind of tread water until he can flip an Avacyn or land a Tragic Arrogance.
So Osyp does have a 4th land for his turn and a Gideon Ally of Zendikar. That's going to bring along with it a 2/2 Knight Ally token. And on David's turn, it looks like we have a 3-mana enchantment that is an Always Watching. So this is going to give +1/+1 to all of his non-token creatures and give them Vigilance. So this will make all of his creatures big enough to at least trade with that Knight token. And if he sends them all at Gideon, Osyp can trade off a token and let it die. But it looks like it's all going towards they're all going towards Gideon, and he's just going to let it die since it would die anyways and keep his 2/2 Knight Ally token around.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the unfortunate, or a little unfortunate for David. He'd really like to push some damage this turn. Osyp hitting his 5th land drop, still being at 16 life. It's kind of a big deal. And this is the point in the game where Osyp is going to start getting control because he's going to be able to leverage some big, powerful spells.
Yeah, one card that David has to be wary of here is Archangel Avacyn. He does have some copies of Stasis Snare in his sideboard, but David does not have any instant speed way to answer an Archangel Avacyn. So there's a very real possibility of it entering the battlefield, sticking around, and then flipping shortly thereafter.
Yeah, Osyp probably has a couple different options. I haven't gotten a crystal clear view of his hand, but he could potentially cast 2 spells this turn to help catch up on tempo. He could play another Planeswalker, which would be a little easier to protect because he still has this Knight token sitting around. And it's likely just to soak up damage and preserve Osyp's life total while he just buys time. And if he has a Dromoka's Command, it could be a really big blowout because he could potentially put a +1/+1 counter on one of his guys, make David sacrifice his Always Watching, and potentially build up to a pretty big blowout inside of combat.
Well, Osyp does have a copy of Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. That's going to go up to 4 and bring along with it an 0/1 plant token. He does have 2 mana available here, so he's deciding whether or not he wants to cast another spell, try and hold up mana for a Dromoka's Command, just see how exactly he wants to play out the rest of this turn.
Yeah, once we get to the point where Osyp gets 5 mana, there's always going to be a lot of options, especially on turn 5, because he still has a lot of cards in hand, because he frequently will have the option to either play something really big or cast 2 spells in the same turn. And it looks like we've got a Dromoka's Command.
Looks like we do have a Dromoka's Command. So he's going to choose the 2 modes to make David sacrifice a creature, and then the 2/2 Knight Ally is going to fight the Thraben Inspector. It's really important to know that the modes on Dromoka's Command all happen in order. So David Wiggs does have to sacrifice that enchantment before the fight happens, which makes the Thraben Inspector a 1/2 when the fight resolves, and the Knight Ally is going to be able to kill the Thraben Inspector off.
Yeah, and the nicest thing about this is now there's no way David can push any damage onto Nissa without a Griff Spoon or a removal spell. Osyp has access to two blockers, and even if David were to deploy another Always Watching, at least the Knight would be able to trade with one of David's creatures. So Osyp also had the option to just put a +1/+1 counter on his guy and make David sacrifice that enchantment and do it inside of combat, but that would mean that Nissa would potentially take some damage.
That also is a little risky in the face of another copy of Always Watching.
Yeah.
So it looks like both creatures are going to attack. It's very likely they are going at Nissa. Osyp is going to decide how he wants to block.
Now, if we think about this Knight token in terms of card advantage, the fact that this Knight token can potentially trade with one of these creatures, you know, it's not quite a 2-for-1 because the Gideon basically got attacked to death for free. Gideon in this game was gain 7 life or whatever it was, maybe 8, and kill a 2/1. So effectively, that's what Gideon was this game. That's kind of all Osyp wants, is just a nice 1-for-1 and to buffer his life total, though.
And then I gave him a body to utilize that Dromoka's command to take care of the 3-minute
That is true.
Spectre. So
yep.
That Knight token did get all of its mileage, but it is going to be traded off against the Expedition Envoy, and David is going to reload with a Handwear Militia Captain and a copy of Kithion, Hero of Akros.
And this game might have been quite different if David was on the play, but we can see the green-white tokens deck executing its normal game plan where it keeps its life total safe because the opponent needs to attack the planeswalkers, and meanwhile green-white tokens is just clogging up the board and just building itself up to enter the mid-game and late game safely.
So heading into Osyp's 6th turn, he has quite a few options. As once you get into the mid to late game with this green-white tokens deck, especially if you're hitting your land drops, you have a lot of powerful cards.
Yeah.
This is the bread and butter of this tokens deck. This is where it wants to be every time.
Yep. Always good to read the cards, even when you know what they do. It's worth double checking.
Also double check what's on the back.
Yep. Osyp is quite the experienced player. Me and him actually teamed together for Pro Tour Dublin, and he was one of my favorite teammates that I've ever had. He's like really, really fun to play test with. He's also just a really smart, funny guy.
All right, well here we have another copy of Gideon, ally of Zendikar for Osyp. He's going to just use the 0 and make a 2/2 Knight ally. He's going to plus his Nissa Voice of Zendikar and make another 0/1 plant token and just pass the turn back to David.
And one of the best cards for David would probably just be a Griff's Boon. He wants a way to attack these planeswalkers without having to send all of his creatures at the same planeswalker. Griff's Boon would also give him a way to get around the tokens that are starting to clog up the board.
Also, if David has a copy of Declaration in Stone, he can clear out those plant tokens and take down one of these planeswalkers.
Yeah. He's still not making any headway on Osyp's life total, though, and if he's paying a card in order to clear the way to kill a planeswalker, he's basically just 1-for-1ing the planeswalker, while the planeswalker's still absorbing a lot of damage. So
it looks like David is going to use a Declaration in Stone on the 2/2 Knight ally token. Now he's going to send in all of his creatures. This is going to trigger the transform on Kithion at the end of combat. We'll go ahead and get a confirmation of where all of those creatures are heading.
Yeah, and what's nice about this play is if he had targeted the plants, he could have potentially killed the Nissa, but he would have had to trade one of his creatures away, likely the Kithion. Whereas this way, he's basically going to be able to flip his Kithion.
So looks like they're all going towards Gideon. Right, so Gideon is going to take 2 damage. Both of Osyp's plants are going to die. We're going to get a transform on Kithion into a Gideon Battleforged. We'll start with 3 loyalty counters. And let's see what he decides to do with his Gideon.
So if I were him, I would probably use the +1 on one of his creatures so that there's no way his opponent's Gideon can kill
the other Gideon?
Yeah.
Gideon cannot kill himself.
Yep. And you can see him looking at the Gideon now to see how much he can attack for. 1 mana for this Gideon Battleforged is quite the deal. It makes you do a little bit of work to flip it, but this white-red humans deck flips it like no other. It just has so many 1-drops. It can easily deploy 3 creatures by turn 2.
Yeah.
And 1 mana for for a Planeswalker that can attack for 4. It's just a bargain.
Yeah, so Gideon is going to +1 on the Militia Captain, pass the turn back to Osyp. Osyp's going to go into his 7th turn here. Let's see if he has some kind of action.
What's also nice about this is it insulates David against sweepers. So if he was up against a Languish deck or a Planar Outburst deck, his Gideon would be able to survive. And in particular in this case, because Osyp has access to Tragic Arrogance, you know, it'll help insulate him against that too. If Osyp did have Tragic Arrogance, he could make it so the Handwire Militia Captain gets sacrificed. Osyp could keep his Gideon and just attack the other David's Gideon down.
But then Osyp is going to end up losing one of his Planeswalkers along with the Tragic Arrogance.
One thing that would be a nice play, though, is if he just made his Gideon into a creature first, then cast Tragic Arrogance. And this is what we see here. This is a great play.
So Osyp is going to make his Gideon a creature. He's going to allow himself to keep a creature Gideon and a Planeswalker Nissa Voice of Zendikar. He's going to have David keep the Dragon Hunter and his Gideon, sacrifice the indestructible Handworm Militia Captain, and then get in for 5 with his Gideon, kill David's Gideon. That's a lot of Gideons. Yeah. And make a
little bit of a tongue
on his turn. So that is, ladies and gentlemen, that is the power of Tragic Arrogance.
Yeah. And yeah, just a great card. I love this green-white tokens deck, and you really get to see it flex its muscles. I mean, at this point, David is going to start to run out of gas. The power of his deck is going to be diminished, and he's going to have a hard time recovering here. Osyp is going to be able to get a lot of value out of his Planeswalkers, and he's also got powerful spells that he's going to be able to cast as well.
All right, David is going to try and rebuild with a copy of Always Watching. He's going to send in his Dragon Hunter, but Osyp is just going to chump block with his 0-1 plant token. He's going to +1 his Gideon again, and we're going to start trying to turn the corner here. Attacking for 5. 5/5 Indestructible is pretty big body.
Yep.
Nissa's going to +1 again, make another 0-1 plant token. And Osyp is going to pass the turn back without a play. Now, if I'm David here, this just screams Archangel Avacyn.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the first turn that green-white tokens passes with all of its mana open, you know for that first turn it's not because they're flooding out.
All right, well, here we have an Archangel Avacyn. That is going to block the Dragon Hunter, and while she may be flying with wings, she is not a dragon, so that's going to eat the Dragon Hunter in combat. Here's a Declaration in Stone during his second main phase for David. That's going to take care of the Archangel Avacyn, but unfortunately it will just give him a clue, and he has 2 mana available to just pop it here on David's end step after he plays a Town Gossipmonger.
Yeah, and this is a situation where you can really see when Declaration of Stone is at its best and at its worst. Early in the game, when your opponent doesn't necessarily have time to crack the clues, White-Red Humans is really able to leverage the efficiency of Declaration of Stone. But now that we're entering the late game, it's really not that great of a removal spell.
All right, Osyp has an Oath of Nissa on his turn. That's going to find him another copy of Gideon Ally of Zendikar. Let's see how he decides to play this turn now.
And one thing that might be nice to do, since he has 2 Gideons, is just make an emblem with the current one, and then play the second one and start spitting out 3/3 night tokens. The emblem is really powerful. It makes your plants have 1 power. It really does a lot of work, but it looks like Osyp's just going to keep that Gideon in reserve.
And we're going to charge it up to 5, send in for 5. That's going to knock David down to 10. Osyp will tick his Nissa up to 6 and make another 0-1 plant token. Oh, and he has a Dramoka's Command, so he's going to put a +1/+1 counter on his animated Gideon. It's going to fight off the Town Gossipmonger, and David's going to say, you know what, I've had enough of this, let's pack it in. We're going to go on to some sideboarded games and see if I can pick things up here. So on, let's take a look at the sideboards here. On Osyp's side, we have 2 copies of Tireless Tracker, 2 Stasis Snare, 1 Clip Wings, 1 Aerial Volley, 2 Lamholt Pacifist, 2 Declaration of Stone, 2 Linval the Preserver, 2 Nissa Vastwood Seer, and 1 Quarantine Field. What do we think Osyp is going to do here?
So I think the things that we're going to see out of Osyp are the Stasis Snare, just to have access to some instant speed removal. Lamholt Pacifist ends up being a great blocker in this situation. He could bring in Declaration of Stone. I personally wouldn't. I think he has enough good cards not to bring it. but he might bring it in anyway. Two cards that I think he'll definitely bring in, though, that are going to excel in the matchup are Linvala and Nissa Vaswood Seer. All he wants to do is hit his land drops and then play some big, powerful spells, especially ones like Linvala that are going to buffer his life total and help lock up the air so that David can't win the game off the back of a card like Griffspoon.
Yeah, Linvala in particular seems very good against his humans deck.
Yep.
Anytime you get to gain 5 life and make 2 flying blockers, seems like you're in a pretty good spot.
Oh, yeah.
Now on David's side, we have 2 Stasis Snare, 1 Silk Wrap, another copy of Griff's Boon, 1 Repel the Abominable, 4 Needle Spires, 4 Reckless Bushwhacker, and 2 Gideon Ally of Zendikar. How do you think he's going to sideboard?
So I think because he's seen the Tragic Arrogance, he's going to bring in the Needle Spires and Bushwhacker package. I think that basically you want to bring those cards in every single time you're up against a sweeper. Gideon Ally of Zendikar might be a card he wants to bring in if he wants to be a little bit more resilient to Tragic Arrogance. It is a little slow, and it can be attacked by Osyp, so he might not want to bring it. The other card he could consider is Stasis Snare, just having an instant speed way to kill Avacyn before she flips could also be something that's worthwhile. Do you remember what Repel the Abominable does?
Repel the Abominable?
Yeah. I think it's one of the new cards.
Yeah, I believe it's the Escalate card, where you can untap creatures and make them indestructible, gain some life, or make them sacrifice.
Sacrifice an attacking creature? Okay. I don't think he'll bring that in.
Yeah. We will get a...
no, it's this card.
That's the human one.
Yeah, the human one.
Prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by non-human sources.
So, very powerful card. I don't know if he'll bring it. I would really like to have that card against a deck with like red sweepers.
Yeah.
I could certainly see him bringing it in here. It would be a good way to make it so that Avacyn doesn't sweep the board, but it doesn't do a whole lot against Tragic Arrogance. And the humans deck, or the green-white tokens deck, it doesn't have any humans, so there's not going to be like any friendly fire. So he might bring it in. It's a pretty sweet one-of. Yeah,
it seems a little too narrow here, but I do like the... I don't want to say it's an innovation because things like this have done before with this deck, but the Needle Spires Bushwhacker in the sideboard, like I am a big fan of playing lands in my sideboard when I can. And for those of you who are big fans of lands in general, I have good news for you. We have a weekly sale going on at StarCityGames.com. So you can save on select full art basic lands. So when I first hear that, I think, oh, well, sweet, Battle for Zendikar lands, the original Zendikar full art lands. But there are also unglued and unhinged.
Yeah, we got all the lands.
There are foil versions of basic lands. So if you like to have sweet lands in your deck, head on over to StarCityGames.com and check out our weekly sale. It does end Monday at 10:59 a.m., where you can save on select full art basic lands, both foil and non-foil. That's pretty cool. Yeah, for sure. Lands are where it's at. I mean, you have to have lands, right? I take great pride in the basic lands that I play. Which basic lands do you use? I find that most people have like one specific set or type of basic lands that they use in all of their decks. So typically I try to use either Ice Age lands, because that's when I first started playing, so there's a nostalgia factor, or I use the full art Zendikar lands, because that's when I really returned to the game. Original Zendikar or Battle for Zendikar? Original Zendikar, yeah. I can get behind that. I used to use like Ice Age Mirage lands a lot, but I always... It's completely irrational, but I always felt like they were thicker. Oh, yeah? And so it just didn't feel right when I was shuffling with them. I know. So I'm a big proponent of Portal and Portal 2 basics. Yeah, I know Mirage has a red, like, sunset mountain that I really, really like. Yeah, Mirage was a sweet set. Mirage was a sweet set. I started playing shortly after Mirage. Yeah. I still have stacks and stacks of like Tempest basics, because that was when I first started buying booster boxes. I made a really smart move. I played during Ice Age, and I played for a number of years after that. But then when I decided to stop playing, I gave my entire collection to Ian and Reed Duke, which was perfect because they kept playing, developed a huge collection. And then when I returned to start playing the game, I had rights to basically borrow stuff from them whenever I wanted. Nice. All right, well, it looks like for Game 2, David is going to be on the play, but he is going to go back and try and find a good 6. Osyp, the big old smile, looks like he's going to keep his opening 7. Seems like he's got some good tricks up his sleeve. Yeah, well, he certainly brought a deck that is prepared to beat white-red humans. A lot of the green-white decks
don't play Tragic Arrogance in the main. A lot do, but a lot don't. I know that previously in the last season, I was anti-Tragic Arrogance in the main just because I was worried about control decks. But in the current environment, it's almost all aggro decks. And having Tragic Arrogance in the main is just a phenomenal metagame call that's going to give you much better win percentage against a deck like White-Red Humans.
So I'm actually really excited to see Osyp here battling. He hasn't been playing on the SCG Tour as much as of late.
Yeah.
He's actually on the Hall of Fame ballot.
Yeah, he is.
I've seen some arguments for and against him through social media from people with votes. So good luck to Osyp on that front. And the first time I ever did any commentary for the SCG Live was filling in for a round, and I got to cast with Osyp.
Oh, that's really cool.
It's pretty nice. So David's going to start off. He did keep his 6. He's got a Kytheon to lead off. Osyp is going to play a Fortified Village, reveal the requisite basic land type, and cast an Oath of Nissa. And look at his top 3. He's going to consult with his hand to see what he needs to find here, either a land, creature, or a Planeswalker card. And there's going to be a basic forest.
And if David can deploy 2 1-drops here, he may be able to flip his Kytheon before Osyp can do anything about it.
All right, well, David is going to attack with his Kytheon, drop Osyp down to 18. Looks like we've got a 1-drop, Dragon Hunter.
And another 1-drop. So this is the ideal start for David. This certainly makes up for the fact that he mulliganed. And with this White-Red Humans deck, frequently it can win without using all of its cards. So.
And a Town Gossip Monger is his other 1-drop. So
yeah, quite good.
he even has the potential here to play an Always Watching on turn 3, attack, and transform that Gossip Monger. This game could be over very quickly.
Yeah. So last game, we got to see Osyp on the play and really have his way with the game state. Here we get to see David really leverage the power of the White-Red Humans deck and really show you guys what its good starts look like.
Well, he might not have Always Watching this turn, but Thalia's Lieutenant is going to come down and put a +1/+1 counter on all of his other humans. He is going to attack with all of his creatures, and Osyp does have that 1/1 Hangerback Walker there, but it's not going to be able to do much in the face of what we've got going on.
Yeah, and if Osyp had a Sylvan Advocate, it would be able to play a little bit of defense here, but Hangerback Walker being a 1/1 is unable to do anything.
So David is going to transform his Gideon. He could +1 here on that Gossip Monger.
Yeah, and then flip it later.
And then flip it later.
Yeah.
Although it looks like he's just going to +2 on the Hangerback Walker.
So that's kind of an interesting play. I guess he just wants to make it so that the Hangerback can't block on the following turn, which is kind of a sweet play also. It wasn't what I thought of first to do with the Gideon, but it may prove to be quite good for him.
All right, so Osyp just has a forest for his turn. Let's see how he wants to develop his board here.
What's nice about this play from David is he knows that there's no way this Hangerback Walker is actually going to be able to kill the Gideon, but having the Hangerback Walker on blocking duty can be pretty bad. That said, if Osyp has a Dramoka's Command, things could get a little hairy inside of combat because Osyp could potentially level up his Hangerback Walker, +1/+1, fight it on the Dragon Hunter. Hangerback Walker would die, and then there'd be 3 Thopter tokens that would be able to play defense.
Now Osyp is down to 10, and that Gideon will be able to crash in for 4 points of damage.
Yep. And it looks like Osyp does have the Dramoka's Command. Looks like he is going to do the play that I suggested, and there's a good chance that this would have happened no matter what, but by having it play out this way, it has to happen on actually, I guess it doesn't even have to happen on Osyp's turn. Osyp could have waited until David's turn to do that. David had something like a land and a Declaration in Stone here. That would be quite nice for him. But it looks like he's got plenty to attack with, as is.
Yeah, so it looks like he has a copy of Town Gossip Monger and a Thalia's Lieutenant, or a Thraben Inspector. He is going to drop down to 18 from using 18 from using that Battlefield Forge, He's not going to do anything with the Gideon just yet.
He might have zeroed it to attack. I didn't see him tap on the card, but I assume that's probably what happened. Giving the Gideon more loyalty doesn't do a whole lot. And there would have to be some blocks, because with the Gideon attacking, it would be a lethal attack. But yeah, since it's not tapped, I guess the Gideon isn't tapping. So one thing to note about this game is David just has a ton of stuff. This is where we get to see the white-red humans deck leverage its tempo. Despite only having access to 2 lands, it has just been able to do a lot because it's predominantly 1-mana spells. Osyp, meanwhile, has only really cast 2 effective spells this game, which is what most decks would only be able to do at this point. It won't be until turn 5 or so that Osyp is able to actually start catching up in this game. And with Osyp being at 10 life and not having a Planeswalker to soak up damage, David is in pretty good shape to win this game, but we'll have to see how it goes.
And it doesn't look like Osyp has any Planar Outburst.
Yeah.
So Tragic Arrogance is going to be his big catch-up card. And with David having that Gideon already transformed into a Planeswalker, there's a lot of risk of still leaving him with some good things once that happens to resolve. So he is just going to +2 his Gideon. Osyp is going to triple block the Thalia's Lieutenant to get it off of the battlefield, but we still have a Gossip Monger with a counter on it. We've got a Gossip Monger without a counter and a Thraben Inspector. But Osyp is going to use his 4th turn to Declaration in Stone both of the Gossip Mongers. That's going to give David 2 clue tokens, but also remove 2 attackers from the battlefield. Yeah. And he's going to play Sylvan Advocate. So he's trying to stabilize here.
One thing that would have been an interesting play from David is if he had +1 on his Gossip Monger, untapping it, because then you could tap it and flip it in response to the Declaration of Stone, and he wouldn't have had 2 things get Declaration in Stone then. It would only be 1.
That is a good point.
Even still, Osyp is on the ropes. David doesn't have much mana, but he does have some redraws, so David is unlikely to run out of gas anytime soon, but we'll have to see if Osyp can just play more powerful stuff that David can't really deal with.
Well, David did animate his Gideon, crashed in for 4. That's going to knock Osyp down to 4. But now he's going into his 5th turn here, and this is the point where he can start casting 2 spells or some big powerful spells and try and catch up.
Yeah. It's going to be tricky, though, because that Gideon is pretty hard for Osyp to actually deal with. The best thing he could do is have, like, 2 Dromoka's commands, because then he could eat both creatures and, you know, start pressuring David's Gideon with his 4/5 Sylvan Advocate. And the Sylvan Advocate would be able to block, but Osyp probably is going to have to block this Gideon for the rest of the game.
Here we have a Nissa Vastwood Seer. That's going to go and find a forest for Osyp to play. This is going to put him 1 step closer to making that Sylvan Advocate a 4/5, which is a pretty good blocker for that Gideon.
Yeah. He's going to have to wait another turn, though, before he can make it a 4/5, so this Nissa is likely going to be on chump blocking duty.
Well, Osyp is going to attack Gideon with the Sylvan Advocate.
And if Osyp has a Dromoka's command, he could play it now, or he could save it for a potential Always Watching and cast it inside of combat. The nice thing about casting Dromoka's command on Osyp's turn is then the Sylvan Advocate gets to fight a creature, and then it doesn't have any damage on it inside of combat during David's attack step. Whereas now if Osyp wants to fight a creature, the Sylvan Advocate is going to have a lot more damage on it in 1 turn and could potentially die.
All right, well, David is going to activate his Gideon and then play a Thalia's Lieutenant here. This is going to enter the battlefield and put a +1/+1 counter on each other human that he controls.
And this is where things get a little tricky with that Dromoka's command, because if Osyp wants to use the Dromoka's command now in response to the trigger, he can, let's say he fights the Hand Warrior Militia Captain, the Sylvan Advocate will be a 4/3, but it'll have 2 damage on it, and then that Thraben Inspector will get a +1/+1 counter and be able to attack into the Sylvan Advocate. Whereas if Osyp had played it on the previous turn, that would not be the case because the Sylvan Advocate wouldn't have any damage on it going into combat.
All right, so the Gideon, the Inspector, and the Militia Captain are all going to get a +1/+1 counter from Thalia's Lieutenant, and David's just going to attack with all of his attackable creatures. Let's see how Osyp wants to block here. Looks like we're thinking about Nissa on Gideon.
And here, I think probably the mode that I would use is just put a +1/+1 counter on the Sylvan Advocate and have Nissa fight the Thalia's Lieutenant. It would mean that Osyp goes down to 2, but if he has a land, he might be in good shape to stabilize.
Land Linvala would be real nice next turn for Osyp. You would gain life, get 2 blockers, have a 5/5 that could block Gideon, and have a 4/5 that can actually pressure David and still stay on defense. But that is Magical Christmas Land, so we are just going to... Yes, he's going to put a counter on Sylvan Advocate. He's going to have the Nissa fight the Thalia's Lieutenant. This means he is going to take 2 points of damage and fall down to 2. But Handworm Militia Captain is going to die. Sylvan Advocate will live as a 3/4, and Nissa is going to chump block that Gideon. Although it is a 5/5 now, which is really relevant.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't think Linvala's Magical Christmas Land. He's playing 2 of them. I play 2 of them. Linvala, she's my homegirl. She's done a lot of work, gotten me out of some tight situations, and I would love to see her enter the battlefield here.
Well, Osyp does have his 6th land here, so that Advocate is now a 5/5 and can actually kill the Gideon, or a 5/6 and can kill the Gideon.
Well, the Gideon has a 6 loyalty, so...
He has 5 loyalty with a +1/+1 counter.
Oh, that's what the other dice was. Got it.
So this is really turning around for Osyp.
Really big deal for Osyp. And at 2 life, it looks like he's just barely going to stabilize.
Yeah. Had David untapped his Gossip Monger and saved one from a Declaration in Stone a million turns ago, this game would be looking much different.
Yep.
All right, well, Declaration in Stone on the Inspector is going to give David a 4th clue token. So if he has 3, might as well give him a 4th.
Yep. And what I like about this, too, is firing off the Declaration of Stone there is a good idea. Even though Osyp basically has the ground locked up, you still got to be worried about something like a Griff Spoon. That's like the one thing that could punk him out of the game. And it's really good to keep the Griff Spoons in post, post sideboard because they're great protection against Dromoka's Command for your always watchings.
Well, David is going to cash in one of his clues. Going to play a Thraben Inspector and get another clue here. He does have 3 lands now, but this 5/6 Sylvan Advocate on Osyp's side is going to be very, very good.
Yeah, and
plays defense well,
and
pressures
offense
well.
And Osyp kind of wants to get this game over with a hurry, but he also wants to find a flyer, an instant speed removal spell, and/or a way to kill his Hangerback Walker. Because he still needs to worry about a Griff Spoon punking him out of this game, and David has a lot of digging power.
All right, so Osyp is just going to attack for 5. That's going to knock David down to 13. David's going to pick up what looked to be a 4th land. He is just going to play Always Watching, though. And maybe this is a setup to give him protection from a Dromoka's Command if he can find a Griff Spoon in the next 2 or 3 cards.
That would be a very good line of play.
All right, well,
Osyp has another.
Just another Declaration. Here you go. Have a 5th clue.
Swing for 8, put you down to 5. Now this Sylvan Advocate is a lethal attacker. And despite having all these redraws, David just doesn't have enough mana to actually make use of all of them.
All right, well, David's going to cash in one of his clues, find nothing, and extend the hand. Osyp is going to stabilize at 2 life. And he is going to take this match. Green-white tokens for Osyp Lebedowicz is going to beat David Higgs on White-Red Humans 2-0.
Yeah, green-white always wins. Yeah, it was a great game. Both decks got to showcase their power. And honestly, the matchup basically played out the way that I'm used to it playing out.